Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The hum of the hotel air conditioner was a monotonous beast, a constant, low thrum that seemed to amplify the silence between me and Ben. Outside, the city lights of Charleston painted the night sky with a hazy orange glow, but inside our shared room on the 7th floor, the atmosphere was a little less vibrant. One king bed. That's what the booking mishap had left us with when our connecting flights got cancelled after his cousin's wedding. One king bed and two grown people who, despite living under the same roof for the better part of a decade, still navigated conversations like polite strangers. Ben, my stepson. He was 24, a good kid, really always respectful, but quiet. So quiet sometimes I felt like I was talking to a shadow. His father, my husband David, always said, "He's just an old soul, Sarah. Takes him a while to warm up." 10 years. I was still waiting for the thaw. The room itself was standard nice hotel fare. Tastefully bland beige walls, a generic print of a sailboat above the headboard, that weirdly specific smell of industrial cleaner, and something vaguely floral. Ben had immediately claimed the small, upholstered armchair by the window, his lanky frame folded into it, scrolling endlessly on his phone. I'd perched on the edge of the bed, pretending to be engrossed in a travel magazine I'd picked up from the lobby, though not a single word had registered. Every few minutes, the silence would stretch so taut I'd feel an almost physical need to break it. "Do you need another pillow?" I'd asked earlier. A polite, "No, thanks, I'm good," was the reply, eyes still glued to the screen. So much for scintillating conversation. I remember thinking, when the desk clerk, bless her flustered heart, had apologetically informed us this was the only room left in the entire hotel, that this was going to be the longest night of my life. I'd imagined awkward bumps in the night, forced small talk over who got the bathroom first, maybe even an argument born of sheer proximity and frayed nerves. What actually happened? Well, I'm still trying to wrap my own head around it, but it wasn't any of those things. I sighed a little too loudly and finally put the magazine down. "Well," I said, trying for a breezy tone, not exactly how I pictured celebrating Will and Jenny's beautiful wedding, stuck in airport hotel limbo. Ben looked up, a flicker of something in his eyes. Surprise annoyance at being disturbed. "Yeah, definitely not," he said, offering a small, almost apologetic smile. It was a start. Still, I pressed on. The ceremony was lovely. Wasn't it? Jenny looked stunning. He nodded. She did. Will seemed happy. Another short, factual statement. I felt like a dentist pulling teeth. This was usually how it went. I'd love a conversational ball. He'd tap it back with the least amount of effort possible, and then the silence would descend again. David always filled these gaps when he was around, his easygoing chatter a bridge between his son's reticence and my attempts at connection. But David was already back home, called away by an urgent work thing right after the reception. So it was just me and Ben and the humming air conditioner. I stood up and walked over to the window, peering out at the distant lights. Charleston seems like a nice place. Too bad we're just seeing it from a hotel window next to the airport. Maybe we can grab a real breakfast downtown before the new flight, Ben said, his voice a little clearer now. I turned surprised. That was an initiative. A small one, but an initiative nonetheless. That's a great idea, Ben. I'd like that. He actually met my gaze for a moment, and the small smile reappeared, a little less strained this time. Maybe this night wouldn't be a total write-off in the annals of step-family bonding. Or maybe I was just an optimist clinging to a breadcrumb. The air conditioner kicked up a notch, as if reminding us of its presence. I glanced at the king-sized bed, then back at Ben in the chair. The unspoken question of sleeping arrangements hung in the air. I figured I'd offer him the bed. I could make do with the armchair if it came to it, though my back wasn't what it used to be. Listen, about the bed. I started, but he cut me off, surprisingly. Don't worry, Sarah. I'm fine here in the chair, or I can take the floor. You take the bed. There was a firmness in his voice, a quiet insistence that brooked no argument. It was thoughtful, more than thoughtful, really. It was considerate in a way that warmed me. Are you sure, Ben, that chair doesn't look like it was designed for a 6-foot-tall guy to sleep in? He shrugged, a gesture I knew well. I've slept in worse places. Scout trips, that one music festival. I'll manage. Seriously. I hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. He just gave a slight nod and looked back towards the window, not at his phone this time, but out at the city. The silence that followed felt different, less strained, more like a comfortable pause. Maybe, just maybe, this forced intimacy wasn't going to be the disaster I'd anticipated. I had no idea then, of course, how much more than not a disaster this night was going to become. I began to get ready for bed, the usual routine of washing my face and brushing my teeth, the small, shared bathroom suddenly feeling a little less awkward. When I came out, Ben was still by the window, his silhouette framed against the city lights. He looked pensive, lost in thought. It was the first time I'd seen him look so. Unguarded, and I felt a strange little tug in my chest, a stirring of something I couldn't quite name. I slipped into bed, the cool sheets a welcome sensation. The king-sized bed felt enormous and empty. I lay there for a while, listening to the hum of the AC and the distant, muted sounds of the city. I could hear Ben's occasional shifts in the armchair, the rustle of fabric. I was about to drift off, thinking that this would be the extent of our adventure. A shared room, a polite negotiation of space, when I heard his voice, soft and hesitant, cut through the quiet. "Sarah?" he asked. "Yeah, Ben," I replied, turning my head slightly towards him. He was still a dark shape against the window, but I could sense his gaze on me. "Can I ask you something?" The question hung in the air, laced with an unfamiliar vulnerability. It wasn't about pillows or breakfast or the logistics of our travel. This felt different. This felt like the beginning of something I hadn't seen coming. "Of course, Ben," I said, my voice equally soft. "Anything." And that's when the night truly began, not with a bang or a fight or any of the dramatic scenarios I might have vaguely braced for, but with a quiet question, and the sense that a door I hadn't even realized was closed was creaking slowly open. The air conditioner hummed on, but now it felt more like background music to a scene I never expected to be a part of. The glow from the city outside cast long shadows across the room, painting stripes on the far wall. Ben was still a silhouette against the window, but he turned slightly, and I could just make out the line of his jaw, the slight downward tilt of his head. There was a weight in his voice when he finally spoke again, a careful deliberateness that made me sit up a little straighter against the pillows. Do you ever feel like you're just going through the motions?" he asked. The question landed softly, but it hit me with surprising force. It wasn't what I expected. I'd braced for something about his dad, or maybe a logistical query about the next day's travel. But this was existential. And from Ben, who usually communicated in nods and monosyllables, it felt like a revelation. I took a moment before answering, choosing my words with care. "Yeah," I said, my voice a little rough. "I think everyone feels like that sometimes, Ben. Like you're on a treadmill, and the scenery isn't changing much." I could see him nod slowly. "It's just, college was supposed to be this big thing. Find your passion, figure out your life. I graduated 6 months ago, and I feel more lost now than before I started." He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry all the weariness of his 24 years. I've sent out like 100 job applications. I get a few interviews. They say I'm a strong candidate. And then, nothing. Or they want 5 years' experience for an entry-level job. How does that even work there? It was. The crack in the quiet facade, the vulnerability he usually kept so carefully hidden. I felt a surge of empathy for him. I remembered that feeling, that terrifying, rudderless sensation after college, the pressure to have it all figured out when you barely understood the questions, let alone the answers. "Oh, Ben, I hear you," I said, and I meant it. That first year after college was one of the hardest for me, too. It's a tough transition. You go from this structured environment where the path is pretty clear, go to class, study, pass exams, to this. The real world with all its messy uncertainties. He was quiet for a long moment. I wondered if I'd said the right thing, if I was overstepping. With Ben, the line was always so fine. But then he spoke again, his voice a little less guarded. "Dad makes it sound so easy," he said, a hint of frustration creeping in. "He just says, 'Keep at it, son. Something will turn up.' Which, I appreciate. But it's not exactly helpful." I winced inwardly. That sounded like David. Pragmatic, optimistic, but sometimes missing the emotional nuance. Your dad means well, Ben. He sees your potential, and he believes in you. But I get it. Sometimes you need more than just a pat on the back. I paused, then decided to share a little of my own story. It felt like a fair trade. When I was your age, I wanted to be a photographer. I had this little darkroom set up in my parents' basement. I'd spend hours in there. But everyone told me it wasn't a real career. So I ended up in marketing. It's been a good career, stable, but there are days, many days, when I wonder what if. Ben shifted in the armchair, turning more towards me. I couldn't see his expression clearly in the dim light, but his posture seemed less tense. "You wanted to be a photographer?" he asked, a note of genuine surprise in his voice. "I never knew that." "Yeah," I said with a small, wistful laugh. "There's a lot you don't know about me, I guess. And maybe a lot I don't know about you." It hung in the air, an acknowledgement of the polite distance we'd always maintained. "It's hard," he said after a beat, "to talk about this stuff. With Dad, I mean. He's great, but he always wants to fix things. Sometimes I don't need things fixed. I just need someone to, I don't know, listen, I guess." "I can do that," I said softly. "I'm a pretty good listener." He was silent for another stretch, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt like he was gathering his thoughts, like the dam of his reserve was slowly, carefully being dismantled. The city lights outside seemed to dim a little, or maybe my eyes were just adjusting better to the darkness, focusing more on the human presence in the room than the world beyond the window. I found myself holding my breath, waiting. This fragile, tentative connection felt like a rare bird that had landed unexpectedly in my hands, and I was terrified of scaring it away. The hotel room, initially a symbol of our awkward predicament, was transforming into something else, a confessional, a neutral ground where walls could come down. I thought about all the years, all the family dinners, the holidays, the brief exchanges in the hallway. We'd been orbiting each other, 2 planets in the same solar system, but never really crossing paths in any meaningful way. Until now, it seemed. Until a cancelled flight and a single hotel room forced us into a different kind of orbit. "It's not just the job stuff," Ben said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. There's something else." I waited, my heart giving a little thump. This felt bigger. deeper. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, Ben," I reassured him. "No pressure." He took a shaky breath. "No, I think I want to. I haven't really talked to anyone about it." I saw him run a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture. "It's about Chloe," he said. Chloe. His girlfriend of 2 years. I'd met her a few times. Sweet girl, bubbly, seemed to adore Ben. I'd thought they were solid. "What about Chloe?" I asked gently. He hesitated, and for a moment I thought he might retreat, pull back into his shell. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the ever-present hum of the air conditioner. Then he let out a long, slow breath, the sound of a heavy weight being reluctantly set down. I think we're going to break up," he said, and the words, quiet as they were, seemed to fill the entire room, heavy with unspoken pain and a profound sense of sadness. My mind raced. Break up, they had seemed so happy at the wedding just yesterday, laughing and holding hands. What could have happened so suddenly, or was this something that had been brewing for a while? Hidden beneath the surface of polite appearances, I thought of Chloe's bright smile, the way Ben's eyes would soften when he looked at her. It was a pairing David and I had both quietly cheered for. This was more than just job-hunting stress. This was heartache, and he was choosing to share it with me, his stepmother, in the impersonal anonymity of a hotel room miles from home. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my knees, trying to convey with my posture, with my silence, that I was here, truly here, to listen. The city outside continued its indifferent glow, but inside our room, the world had narrowed to just the two of us and the fragile, emerging truth. Ben's voice, when he continued, was laced with a raw honesty that tugged at my heartstrings. It's not like there was a big fight or anything," he explained, his words halting at first, then gaining a steadier rhythm as he spoke. "It's more like we've just been drifting. For months, maybe longer. We want different things, I think. She's talking about settling down, thinking about marriage, kids even. And I'm still trying to figure out how to get a job that pays more than minimum wage." He let out a short, mirthless laugh. "It's like we're on different pages, reading completely different books." I nodded slowly, understanding the painful dissonance of diverging paths in a relationship. "That's a tough place to be, Ben," I said softly. "When you still care about someone, but you realize your futures might not line up." "Exactly," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "I do care about her. So much. That's what makes it so hard. It would almost be easier if I didn't, if I could just be angry or resentful. But I can't. She's amazing. She deserves someone who can give her what she wants, what she's ready for." He paused, and I could hear the catch in his voice. "And I'm just not that guy. Not right now, anyway." The admission seemed to hang heavy in the air. It was a mature realization, a painful one, but also incredibly selfless. He wasn't blaming her. He was looking inward, acknowledging his own limitations, his own unreadiness. It was a side of Ben I had never seen, this depth of introspection, this quiet sorrow. The young man who usually hid behind a wall of quiet reserve was laying his heart bare, and I felt a profound sense of privilege to be the one he chose to confide in. We talked a little after the reception last night. He continued, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the window. "Just touched on it, but we both knew what we weren't saying. It felt like saying goodbye, even though we didn't use those words. That explained the pensive mood I'd sensed earlier. The wedding, a celebration of love and commitment, must have been a stark and painful backdrop for their own quiet unraveling. "I'm so sorry, Ben," I said, and the sincerity in my voice seemed to reach him. "That sounds incredibly painful, especially with all the wedding festivities going on around you." He nodded, a barely perceptible movement in the dim light. Yeah, it was surreal. Smiling for photos, dancing, pretending everything was fine. It felt like I was an actor in a play. I thought of my own past heartbreaks, the quiet agonies that life inevitably deals. It takes a lot of courage to face something like that, I told him. And even more to talk about it. I haven't told Dad, he said, his voice dropping again. I don't know how. He loves Chloe. He'll be disappointed. He'll try to fix it. There it was again, the fear of his father's well-intentioned, but sometimes overwhelming desire to problem solve. Maybe, I suggested gently, you don't need him to fix it. Maybe you just need him to understand. And maybe he'll surprise you. Ben didn't respond to that directly, but he let out a long, slow sigh, as if releasing a bit of the tension he'd been holding. It's just a lot, he said. The job, Chloe. I feel like I'm failing at adulting, you know. A small, sad smile touched my lips. Oh, honey, if there's one secret I've learned, it's that most of us are just winging it. Adulting, as you call it, doesn't come with a manual. We all stumble. We all have moments where we feel like we're completely lost. I shifted, pulling my knees up to my chest. What you're feeling is normal, and it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to feel sad or lost or overwhelmed. He was quiet for a long time then, so long that I started to wonder if he'd retreated back into himself. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner and the faint, distant siren of an emergency vehicle, a reminder of the bustling world outside, so oblivious to the small, intense drama unfolding in our little hotel room. But then he spoke again, his voice softer now, almost reflective. "Thanks, Sarah," he said. Just 2 words, but they were imbued with a warmth, a sincerity that made my chest ache in a good way. I didn't expect to say all this. I didn't expect you to. Well, to get it. I'm glad you did, I replied honestly. And I'm glad I could be here to listen. Sometimes just saying things out loud can help, can't it? He nodded. Yeah, it really can. The shadows in the room seemed to have softened. Or maybe it was the atmosphere between us that had lightened, cleared by the airing of his burdens. It was a strange and unexpected intimacy, forged in the late hours in a sterile hotel room. I never thought this would happen with my stepson, this quiet sharing of hearts. I'd always seen him as David's son, a polite fixture in my life. But tonight, I was seeing Ben, just Ben, a young man struggling with love and life, with all the messy, complicated emotions that come with being human. And in that moment, he wasn't just David's son. He felt like family in a way he never quite had before. A genuine, heartfelt connection was blossoming in the most unlikely of places. The rest of the night, or rather the early hours of the morning, passed in a series of these quiet exchanges. Ben talked more about Chloe, about their shared memories, the good times, the slow, almost imperceptible drift that had led them to this painful juncture. He spoke of his fears about the future, the daunting prospect of starting over in his romantic life while still trying to launch a career. He didn't cry, but his voice was thick with unshed tears at times, and I found myself simply listening, offering a quiet word of understanding here and there, a murmur of empathy. I didn't offer solutions or platitudes. I didn't tell him it would all be okay, because sometimes, when you're in the thick of it, those words can feel hollow. Instead, I just held space for his sadness, for his uncertainty. I shared a little more about my own early struggles, the detours my life had taken, the times I'd felt lost or heartbroken. Not to compare, but to let him know he wasn't alone in the experience of navigating life's choppy waters. It was a delicate dance of disclosure and listening, a shared vulnerability that felt both precious and profound, The impersonal hotel room had become a sanctuary, a temporary haven where masks could be set aside. At some point, the first hint of dawn began to dilute the deep blue of the night sky outside our window. A soft, pearly gray light started to filter into the room, chasing away the deepest shadows. Ben had fallen silent a while ago, not an awkward silence this time, but a restful one. I glanced over at him. He was still in the armchair, his head leaning against the back, his breathing even and deep. He'd finally drifted off to sleep, looking younger, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. A wave of tenderness washed over me, so potent it almost surprised me. This young man, who had always been on the periphery of my emotional landscape, had somehow, in the span of a few hours, found a place much closer to the center. I realized then that the unexpected experience I was having wasn't about the awkwardness of a shared room or the inconvenience of a canceled flight. It was about connection. True, unvarnished, human connection. It was about seeing past the roles we played, stepmother, stepson, and recognizing the person underneath. I never thought this would happen with my stepson in a hotel room. I never thought he would open up to me like that. I never thought I'd feel this wave of almost maternal protectiveness, this deep sense of empathy and genuine affection that went beyond the polite regard I'd always maintained. Careful not to wake him, I slipped out of bed. My back was a little stiff from sitting and listening for so long, but I barely noticed. I found an extra blanket in the closet, the thin, standard hotel kind, and gently draped it over him. He stirred slightly, a small frown creasing his brow for a moment, then settled back into sleep. His phone lay on the small table beside him, dark and silent. For a few moments, I just stood there, watching him sleep, the quiet hum of the air conditioner the only sound. The city outside was waking up, the sky now a soft blend of pink and orange. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unexpected turn the night had taken. We hadn't solved any of Ben's problems. His heart was still broken. His job search was still daunting. But he wasn't carrying it all alone anymore. And our relationship, his and mine, had shifted, deepened, transformed by a few hours of honest conversation in an anonymous hotel room. It was a reminder, I thought, that sometimes the most significant moments in life don't announce themselves with trumpets. They arrive quietly in unexpected places when we least expect them, and they change everything. As I looked at Ben, peaceful in his sleep, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that something fundamental had changed between us. We had found a bridge, and I had a feeling that this bridge, built in the quiet hours of a difficult night, would last. It was a discovery, a quiet revelation, and it filled me with a sense of hope, not just for Ben, but for us, for our slightly unconventional, blended family. The sun was rising, and it felt like the dawn of something new.